With the general election on the horizon, there are still many questions about voting. What's allowed, what's not allowed, and some of the rules people may not even realize exist. To help break it all down for us, we are joined by Khaleel Parker KC, President of the Bahamas Bar Association. Good morning and welcome to Bahamas at Sunrise.
Good morning. I'm here as a friend of the show.
A friend of the show. Listen,
Yes.
we saw you on social media
Yes.
yesterday. You were at the advance polls. You were in the role as a lawyer for the F&M party, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And there was some heated conversation or passionate conversation happening. So tell us what was going on in that video.
Well, in that instance, the lawyers called to the scene. We don't sit in the room. The poll workers sit in the room. The poll workers are usually people who live in the polling division, who know the goings and comings. They know Ms. Johnson, they know Mr. Smith, and if there's something going on, they sound the alarm. Every candidate typically has attorneys representing them, and they will call their attorneys. And if you watch the footage, you'll see I was in the room, attorneys for the other side were in the room, and what happens is that until the issue is resolved, the process is supposed to stop because we're questioning what is supposed to happen with the ballot in question.
Okay.
And when I attended the room in that instance, you would have heard me describing the condition of the voter.
Right.
And in that instance, by the time I came to the question was whether or not the voter was entitled to have somebody assist them in the voting exercise. Not a question of simply escorting them to the booth, which is usual. Somebody in a wheelchair needs to be positioned so that they can exercise their vote in a confidential manner, but they need assistance and they want somebody to be with them. But when you have somebody who's going to essentially vote for you, you have to meet the statutory requirements. And it is typically a physical incapacity to do it yourself.
So just so that we're clear, let's pause for a moment. So an individual came in and had another individual with them
Yes.
to vote for them?
Yes, that was the situation.
So how do we even get to that point? How do they get into the room?
You have to declare your incapacity. You have to say, I am here to assist an incapacitated voter. The voter has to take the oath declaring the incapacity. The person assisting them takes an oath to say that they will faithfully do what the person says. But you have to, and the question is that can be challenged. If somebody from any party who's in the local community says, well, I know that that person isn't in an instance blind, they burst my dog with a rock yesterday, I can challenge the question. And then the question is, the presiding officer has to decide whether this is a bona fide use of this facility or it is not. When we attended, the voting had been suspended to determine that question.
Okay.
However, while it was going on, the person proceeded to attempt to vote while the question was unresolved. Okay. And what you would have seen me doing is insisting that the process stop until the returning officer, who is the final say, arrives and makes a determination. It is not for me to say whether somebody is incapacitated or not incapacitated, or to say whether somebody can go in or not. The only question is whether this particular instance is in accordance with the rules. And so it was not a question of me saying, that's not my business. My business is to make sure that the proper process was followed. And so that was what I was explaining. I was explaining, somebody said, well, you can't just stop the woman from blind. It's like, this is not the point. We were saying what her situation was, but that has to be determined by the officials in the normal way.
Okay, so here's my question.
Yes.
For individuals that are going to vote, if there is some special need, how
Yes.
are they accommodated? So if someone goes in that is legally blind, how do they vote? What's the process
Well,
for that?
again,
What's the rules?
it is normal. They get to, they come in, they take the oath, because again, there's not a medical facility. They're not going to do within reason, you take people at their word, because the point is you want them to vote.
Right.
And so usually once the presiding officer is satisfied that proper due diligence is taken on the spot, and if there's any challenge, the returning officer, they take the oath, they go in, they take the instructions, and they do what is required in the process with the assistance. And the person who does it for them is under a duty not to disclose that to anybody.
Right.
And you can do that for one person per election.
Okay.
It is an ordinary part. I want anybody to feel like if you have an infirmity or a problem that you shouldn't come out to vote, bring your loved one or somebody to help you. That is part of the process. However, because, as I say, there are the poll workers who can question you and they can challenge, this may happen, but it is not about you. You be comfortable in your situation and you stand on your position, and after the process has gone through, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to vote. It just takes some time sometimes.
Right. I always say you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So
Well, 1 second. You will always be allowed to vote. The question is whether you'll be allowed to vote with assistance.
Gotcha. So in keeping with that, you don't know what you don't know. Of course, the rules surrounding election, it comes around every 5 years, and so, are we educating people on what the rules are? Do people know? Are there things that, some rules that exist that maybe we don't even know about, that we should know about? What do you know? What do you
I
share?
think there needs to be a deeper understanding of what is supposed to happen in the room, because I try to always to explain. You've seen me at the door trying to explain to the lady I referred to as ma'am. This is just part of the process. Nobody's trying to disenfranchise anybody.
And
Yes,
people get heated when they don't know,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yeah. And so I was trying to demystify. Yes, it was an intense situation because you have to make sure that protocol is followed. And to your point, what I found in particular in that instance was that we need to spend more time training the presiding officers and the teams, because what they did not know, what you don't know can hurt you in certain circumstances. And so it is easier for us to do our jobs if they know fully. And after the experience, we got it all sorted out. I was pulled aside by some of the representatives saying, well, we were trained one way. And so what we are calling for, I called for yesterday a meeting with all stakeholders and the Parliamentary Registration Department to discuss these things. But if you see lawyers walking around from each party, we have our little book with the rules and how these things are to be approached. And I think that if they show us and if we engage on training in the training, so make sure everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet, we wouldn't have problems like that.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you said that. Of course, the lawyers are walking around with the rule books, but as individuals coming up to vote, we don't have the rule books,
Yes.
right? We may have access. I don't know if
Yes.
access exists, so we don't necessarily have that. But I think about the election. We drive along the streets, we
Yes.
see all of these beautiful signs. I mean, like every party is perfectly branded
Yes.
with all the signs up. Can we not have signs up?
Yes.
That outlines this is the rule, this is the procedure.
Well, this is why I'm here. It was a long day yesterday, but when I got the call to come in just to talk about this issue in a nonpartisan way, I could not say no. So I'm up with you to do this.
And we appreciate
and
that.
So it is everybody's responsibility to train. We train our people. Everybody trains their people.
Yeah.
And I think that a part of the election exercise and a part of the PRD exercise should be exercises like you say,
Yeah.
we do it at the bar, but Law Matters, this is a Law Matters, this is a right for a Law Matters segment.
Absolutely.
Because it like I said, we do it every cycle.
Yeah, I have to ask you too, another very passionate social media video that was circulating was one with in Garden Hills with Rick Fox. You may have seen that,
Yes.
where one of the individuals that approached Rick Fox did say, forget the law, right? Tell us a little bit about that scenario. What happened there?
Well, again, you talked about the paraphernalia and the setups, and tenting is very important. Who gets pride of place at the entryway. A lot of that is ad hoc. A lot of that is first come first serve. A lot of that comes down to some people trying to strong arm other people. I think that everybody has a right to be present and represented at the polling places, and we do discuss things like distance and sound and the music and whatnot. But there is not sufficient drilling down, because we don't know the sites until relatively close, and it is a race to occupy spots, and you don't, so I think that we can do things to release the tension. We know what's coming up. You know the sites you're going to use. If you want to roll, if you plot out, these are the spaces assigned for various parties. We're going to give them by drawing lots or whatever else it is. So it's not left to the survival of the fittest.
Right.
And you get into situations like that, and the police have to intervene.
Yeah.
That's a common sense way to approach it. To me, if I am organizing an election, I know people will do this as a part of our culture. Don't leave that part to chance. Find a way to make it clear so people don't have to sleep 24 hours in advance with their blanket, and so that is how that happened.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on. I feel like we could talk all day,
Yes.
but listen, we have 12 more days,
Yes.
12 days to get it right.
Yes.
Hopefully we do. Thank you
Amen.
so much for being
You're
here
welcome.
with us. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Bahamas at Sunrise. The tensions are rising as we gear up for the election, but be sure to do your part. Stay calm and go out there and vote. We'll be right back.